Hi, going to be reviewing the trade activity for the orderIT system for November the 20th, 2020. Stock BA. The Boeing Company. It was tripped at 11:20.02 at a price of 201.60, and it was tripped as a short sell. It ended the day at 199.62. It was down 2.94%, so it was down a good amount, and it actually dropped below the trigger price, so that is a positive trade. And the analysis is OBV down by the end of the day. MACD was moving down at the end of the day also, not straight down, but down. DI moving heavily downwards DI wise, so DI was showing it down, and Bollinger Band showing a steady decrease down. Trade JPM, JP Morgan Chase. It was tripped at 12:10 at a price of 114.41. It was also tripped as a short sell. It came down 0.86% and closed the day at 114.57, so it closed above the tripping price. We'll see if there's any point during the daytime that it was down below that. So we can see around this time, so we can see any time up to this point, 11:43, 11:49. Actually down here, look, it's dropping down here, 11:36. 11:30. You can see roughly in this area it was down below the entry price, so that, from my perspective, is a positive trade, because there were points during the trade day that could have been a positive trade. Even though it ended the day above, it still was possible during the daytime to go down. Just check the analysis indicators. OBV showing somewhat semi-positive in the morning till early mid-afternoon, I guess. Mid-afternoon came down a bit and then stabilized. MACD showing the same thing. It basically came down mid-afternoon, but actually was good. Morning and mid-afternoon it was down. DI also showing it bouncing back and forth, but again it was showing it down at the end of the day. So even though it actually came up Bollinger Band wise, the indicators were somewhat, well, DI is showing it, the MACD is actually showing positive, DI showing negative. So bouncing back and forth, so kind of almost like 50% there, but possibility was good for that trade. Trade FLS, Flowserve Corporation. It tripped at 12:15.22 at a price of 32.86 and indicated a short sell. It closed the day at 32.91, down 3.35%, so it was down a good amount, but it did close above the tripping price, so we'll see if there's any point where after the tripping it came down. So it tripped right around this area, so 32.63, so it was down at this time. Yeah, you can see roughly during this period of time it was down, and again down just, so it was a good hour of time that it was down below its trade price or its trigger price, so that would have been a positive trade if you got out, obviously, at those points. We'll check the indicators. OBV showing it came down early afternoon and came down mid-afternoon, bouncing back and forth a bit. MACD, interestingly, is actually not showing it. See, it was down. It was down a bit when it tripped, but MACD is showing somewhat positive all day long. DI showing it's somewhat a bit of a head during negative. It was down a good portion of the day on DI wise. End of day though, you could see it was recovering. Bollinger Bands was showing it somewhat a steady decline till the end of the day. So the end result is that would have been a positive trade if you got out at the points where it did drip below. Next trade, IGT, International Games Technology. It tripped at 1225.01 at a price of 13.11. It was indicated as a buy trade. It closed the day at 12.88, so it wasn't up at the end of the day. So we'll check to see 12.55. So roughly around. It's interesting because the price here is not indicating the price that it was tripped at. It says at 13.11, but around that time it wasn't up around that area. But we'll see if it was down. So 12.90, 12.87. There's points in the daytime where it was below the tripping price. So I consider that a positive trade, even though it was down below its trigger price by the end of the day. Okay, see, yeah. Somehow I was getting it probably tripped at this price, and it did trip at that price, 12.25. I was looking for some reason at 12.55. So yeah, it tripped around here. So that's correct. Okay, so let's check the indicators. Indicators showing it came up in the morning, came up in the afternoon, so that's pretty much straightforward. So MACD showing it came up in the morning, dropped in the afternoon, came up in the mid-afternoon, and then was dropping in the late afternoon. DI was showing it being positive, negative, positive. DI is actually showing it bouncing back and forth. Bollinger Band showing the same thing. So this would have been definitely a stock that was a positive, but you would have had to monitor. Next trade is CVX. Chevron Corporation. It tripped at 1255.14 at 85.42 as a short sell. It closed at 85.79, so again it closed above. It tripped at 12.55, so roughly around this area, 85.79. You can see it recovered in the afternoon, and 85.70. Yeah. No, this stock is actually up. The end result at the end of the day was actually up above its previous close. So the stock is not necessarily a strong downward trending stock. So let's just check the indicators to see what they're showing. You see, it came down here, tripped down here. Both MACD, OBV, and DI are basically saying that hey, it tripped here, but as you can see, right after it tripped, it recovered. Yeah, it recovered. So across the board, this would have been a negative trade. You would have not made any money by the end of the day, and there was no points during the daytime, and the stock itself was not moving heavily negative after it tripped. So next trade is BBBY. That's Bed Bath & Beyond. It tripped at 2 o'clock and 59 seconds at a price of 20.40. It was indicated as a short sell at 20.40. It closed the day at 20.24. It was down 0.93%, so down almost a percent. So that's a good indication there, just in price. So that's a positive trade. We'll check the indicators. Indicators, it's showing OBBY somewhat a somewhat downward trend. Afternoon, you could see it was recovering, but downward trend for most of the day, well, most of the other day, except for the afternoon, obviously. MACD showing the same thing. showing recovery and then decline that, so that's showing the same kind of circumstance. DI showing somewhat until late afternoon that it was somewhat negative and heavily negative in the afternoon itself, which you can see by here, and end of day it was somewhat again just coming back down to negative. Bollinger Band basically just a representation to show you it was moving down for the most part of the day, so another positive trade. Next trade is CFG, Citizens Financial Group. It tripped at 230.20. Excuse me. Excuse me again. It tripped at 31.92 as a short sell, and it actually closed at 32.28. It was down 162, so it was down for the day, but it did recover after its tripping price. And we'll see if any time after its tripping it recovered. So it tripped around 230, so around this point. And 32.28, 31, tripped at 31.92, 31.85, 31.89. See, this section here, which is almost at least half an hour of time, it was down below its tripping price, but you can see end of day it did recover fairly heavily, even though end of day it was coming down again, but you can see late afternoon it shot up. But just right around the time of the trigger, there was a period that it was down. I consider that a positive because there was a good period of time during the daytime that it was down below its tripping price. Check the indicators to see how they show. That sheet is done. Excuse me again. OBV showing somewhat sideways for the most part of the day, and this point where it came down in mid-afternoon is where it tripped. MACD bouncing back and forth, showing the same thing, and at the mid-afternoon it tripped. DI is actually showing much more positive much more negative movement during the daytime. So this one was more consistent with the direction that the system indicated. It though, like everything else, indicated it was moving up end of the day, so it did make a recovery. So it Bollinger Band showing that for the most part of the day up until the trigger price, it was somewhat coming down on a fairly consistent basis, but at the end of the day it just recovered, so that was just a coincidence that the stock recovered during that period of time. Next trade is RUN, Sunrun Incorporated, tripped at 235.03 at a price of 62.79, and it was indicated as a buy trade. It closed the day at 61.44, so it was down from its tripping price, but it was up for the day 3.26%, so it was actually up a good point. We'll check to see 235, so it tripped around here, but you can see it just came down for the rest of the day, so there was no point, and the rest of the day it came up. So it tripped and then came down. We'll check to see if the indicator is showing any strong, heavy movement. OBV showing consistently moving upwards. MACD very strongly till mid-afternoon. You can see it actually came down negative afternoon. Excuse me again. DI is showing also consistently moving up and then downward. So happened to be the end of the day. It actually was showing downward activity. I think though that I would put this as a possible just because the stock itself was up a good percentage-wise by the end of the day. So the stock was definitely up by a good amount. The indicators are showing that practically the whole day it was moving up. Bollinger Band, not heavily though. Bollinger Band somewhat moving sideways. Bollinger Band is a bit out of skew. There must have been a point that was showing that some tag that was increasing the price of it. But anyway, you can see Bollinger Band looks like it was moving sideways for the most part. Possible trade. Next trade is RUN again, and that is the same trade. I'm just going to delete that because it's not supposed to be there. And next trade is NETE. That's Net Element Incorporated. It tripped at 235.03 at a price of 1263, and it was a buy trade. It actually closed at its trigger price, but up 30.61%. That tells you this stock moved up heavily, or was moving up there very heavily. Moved up 30% of its previous close, so that's very heavily. And we'll see if it was up during the daytime. 1263, 1235. You can see it actually came up above just in this section here, which is probably a good 15-20 minutes. And up there. So it actually is a good portion of time here, a good hour time where it was up. So I consider that a positive trade. And we'll check the indicators, which should show it moving positive in general. 1435. That's the trade. Interestingly, the indicators are showing it somewhat at the time that it was tripped. It was actually moving down. Around this time where it came up again, it tripped. OBV was showing actually afternoon it was coming down. DI again showing coming down. It was strong in the mid-afternoon, but coming down. It did look like the DI was showing a bit of recovery at the end of the day. Bollinger Band actually was just showing it was coming down and just happened to trip around this time. So it probably was just the aspects of people getting out of it because it raised up so much, so that brought the price down and brought it overall wise downwards. But it was up such high percentage wise that the potential was still there very heavily. I said there was 15 trades, but I actually had a trade that was showing twice, so there was actually 14 trades, and most likely 10 sales in that. So that was NETE. Let's make sure. Yes, NETE. Next trade is QCOM. Qualcomm Incorporated. It tripped at 304.29 at a price of 147.78. It was indicated as a short sell, and it was down 1.02%, and it was at a close of 146.03, so that's below the tripping price, so that's another positive trade. We'll take a look at the indicators. Indicators, OBV showing somewhat sideways in the morning till mid-afternoon, and mid-afternoon just basically dropped. MACD showing it was dropping practically from the point of when it was recording till the end of the day down. DI showing very strongly down at the end of the day, but down for the most part. So the stock itself was just moving downwards across the board. DVN, Devon Energy Corporation. It tripped at 310.33 at a price of 13.14. It was indicated as a short sell. It closed the day at 13.16, so it was up, even though previous close percentage-wise it's down 2.95%, so almost down 3%. So this stock was down. You can see early morning. Yes, it dropped also from early morning till early afternoon. Or excuse me, early morning to early afternoon. It dropped, stabilized itself. So when we caught it around this point in time, so let's see, 13.11, and it recovered up here. There's a good half an hour here that it was down below its tripping price, so I consider that a positive trade. But you would have had to monitor that stock, obviously, because by the end of the day it was recovering, so the potential was getting out positive, but again, would have required monitoring. OBV wise, yes, you can see morning time it just shot down and then moving sideways, which is again representative of the actual price. MACD showing the same thing, even though it's showing a bit of recovery mid-afternoon. DI showing very strongly. Morning it was moving downwards and then making a little recovery again and stuff like that, bouncing back and forth. But you can see Bollinger Band basically showing you also it just came down and then basically stabilized, moving sideways in the afternoon time. MCD, McDonald's Corporation. It tripped at 320.20 at a price of $213.91, and it was a short sell. It closed at 214.09, so it closed above. It was down only 0.5%. As you can see, it increased up here at the end of the day. 320, which was around that price. 215. 213.92. That stock is not indicating heavily positive wise, or heavily negative wise, I should say, since it was going down at 2020. OBV is showing that it came down and then basically moved sideways, came down, moved sideways, came down, moved sideways. By the end of the day, it was showing negative across the board. Downward, downwards. Indicators are showing it was moving downwards trend-wise. I'll mark this as a possible, just because of the indicators, somewhat showing it moving in that direction fairly consistently. Excuse me. PAA, Plains All-American Pipelines. It tripped at 330.11 at a price of $7.95. It tripped as a short sell. It closed the day at $7.93, down 4%. So across the board, that's down, and you can see that it was down by the end of the day. So I consider that a positive trade. And we'll just check the indicators. You see the price itself just steadily downwards. So happened to be that we caught it at the end of the day. MACD, I should say, started up here. OBV showing it somewhat coming downwards across the board. MACD showing it coming down across the board. DI coming down, bouncing a little bit in the early afternoon, but for the most part coming down for the whole day. And you can see at the end of the day it was showing strong downwards trend. Bollinger Band showing the same thing. So that definitely is a positive trade. Next trade is MUR, Murphy Oil Corporation. It tripped at 335.03 at a price of $9.62. It was a short sell, and it closed at $9.53, down 2.66%. So that is showing again a very positive, downward activity and a positive trade because it closed below its trigger price for a short sell. That's positive, so it's another positive trade. So that's it, and we'll check to see what the percentage-wise is. So we had 14 trades. We had 11 positive. So that's 78% positive trade activity for that day. So good day again. I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.